Welcome back. All right, so in the last video, we added the user components that will allow us to control the displays. Now we want to automate that based on behavior in our design that our users might experience. So let's talk about what that might mean. First of all, we're going to provide some power buttons onto the display on the UCI. Obviously, we want someone to be able to control, turn the TVs on and off from that touch panel. That means we're going to use new control pins and a new block controller to configure each TV to automatically turn on when a laptop is connected and automatically route that laptop to the displays. We want, when someone plugs in that HDMI cable, if the displays are off, we want the displays to be on, right? That saves them one step and makes this room a little bit closer to anticipating their needs and automating what they're doing. So we want to receive them. Now, we haven't gotten to the point yet in our design where we have written the control for HDMI routing to the displays. We'll get that later. So we can accomplish some of this right now. We're going to turn the displays on. We'll finish all of it later when we wrap everything up. We also want to configure the TVs to turn off when there's been no active source for 10 minutes. So you know that if they disconnect their HDMI cable and they walk away, most displays will eventually go to some sort of idle or sleep state after 10 minutes or so. You can usually customize that. And when they do, it kind of goes to like a half visible logo of the brand of the TV or something like that. If that's the case, we want to turn our displays off. We're going to save power, we're going to save money, or the CEO is going to love us because we saved so much money from our displays that aren't wasting power. It's probably millions of dollars a year, I would guess, right? Realistically?
Or billions.
Billions. So I'm saving you billions. I get 10% of that. Patrick gets 2. Okay, so we need to automate all of that. In the process of doing that, we're going to introduce you to some new concepts in the block controller. So to accomplish this right now, we're going to have some new blocks. Some new blocks you'll see are the legend block. The .legend block lets you change the label of a button. We're going to introduce you to arguments, also known as function inputs. These are secondary bits of information that we can input into our functions that gets carried along inside the function, kind of like comes along for the ride, and you get to do different things with it based on what it is. I'll show you the string concatenation block, which is a way of forming a longer string out of just smashing 2 other strings together. And we're also going to talk about named components, one of the most valuable things that we can possibly have. Named components is a way of connecting to your controls in the system without wires at all. So let's jump back into our design. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new block controller. We're going to do it over here in the displays section where we added our user components. Let's grab a new block controller. I'm going to search for block. Now, why are we adding a new block controller? We already got a block controller down here. Why do we need a new one? Can't we just add it to the first one? We could if we want to be terrible people. I don't think I'm terrible people. Patrick, am I terrible people?
Some days.
That's true. He's got a good point on that one. That's not a lie. We want to add a new block controller because it separates our code. If something goes down or we're editing the code and it's not correct and we've got an error, I don't want that to break everything in the entire building. I only want it to break the parts that I'm working on, right? It also makes it way easier to troubleshoot if the thing that you're working on is contained within itself. We already saw that as we're editing our UCI layer block controller, that this window, it starts to get filled up pretty quickly with all these different blocks. And this one's complete, but I don't want to add more to this that has nothing to do with UCI layer controls. So always going to add a new block controller, keep our systems separate. This is going to be the displays control block controller. One word, as I prefer, to keep it wide, as I've said in the past. Let's open up its control panel and add some controls to it. If we look at the Kolarczyk TV control user component, we can already see that it's got some pins exposed to us. It's got a power on and a power off. It is ready to receive something from Q-SYS to turn this display on. And if I open it up and look at the power on or the power off, and I look at the properties of that control, I can see that it is a trigger button. So I know I need to send a trigger to those 2 buttons. So we're going to use triggers inside of our block controller. Let's add a control. We'll call this one power on. It's not going to be a toggle button. It will be a trigger button. And control pin wise, it needs to have an output, so we can wire it to our display user components. We're going to do another one for power off. Power off, also a trigger button, also with an output pin, so we can wire those up. And we can actually use the signal tags that has already been created here. So I'm just going to copy the power on, paste it to the power on. Same thing with power off. That way, these triggers are already in conjunction. We don't need to provide individual control for the left and right display in this room. That's not important. We want one master button that's going to turn them on and turn them off. Actually, one master button. Do we want to give the user an on button and an off button the way that we've shown them here? Or do we want to give them one button that will toggle it? We could kind of go either way on this. There might be some people that want a dedicated on or dedicated off. There's other people that might want the toggle. If you're used to your remote control at home, you've got one button and it toggles it no matter what. It changes it from what it is on to the other state, right? But that button doesn't give you any feedback. It doesn't tell you if the control is on or if it's off. So we kind of get a little bit into a bit of a quagmire here. What is the behavior that we want? If we put a button on the UCI that represents the current state of the displays, then it's going to be glowing on when the TVs are on, right? Does that mean it's not instinctive to press a glowing button to turn the displays off? Wouldn't it make more sense to have the button look like it's off so when you're pressing it, it's going to be off? Or would it be the other way around? Would you want the power button to be off when the displays are on and you press the button, but then it glows, then it's glowing when the displays are off?
Nate, your brain is broken.
I know, right? And that's what I don't want the users to do. I don't want their brains to break, right? You don't want to make them overthink it and question your UCI. So for that reason, it might be a good idea to do the dedicated on or off, or we can do what we're going to do, and we're going to give them instructions so that they can't get it wrong. If you can teach them, then that's better than having them guess. So that as long as they read the thing, they know what's going to happen, and it gives me an excuse to teach you one more thing as we're going through this. So let's add one more control here. I'm going to add another control, and this is going to be called the Power Master. And this one will be a toggle button. Power Master will be a toggle button. That's going to be what we put on our UCI. So we got power on, power off, Power Master. Oh, by the way, if you didn't catch it, here's a good example of how the control pins always show up alphabetically, or alphanumerically, I should probably say, rather than necessarily the way you have them arranged in here. So power off, OF, is alphanumerically before power on, ON. So make sure you get those control pins right, because on the Clark TV control, on is first and off is second. But here, alphanumerically, off is first and on is second. So, you could, maybe you rename this power 1 on or power 2 off if you want to cover your bases, something like that. All right, we're going to add the master toggle button onto our UCI. So I'm going to drag that out of here. We don't need any control pins for that one. I'm going to cut that from my design and paste it onto my UCI. We want this to be on the displays layer. I'm going to paste it near the top, and I'm going to make it really wide. Now, this is not what you would normally expect from a power button, right? Power buttons are normally either circular or square. But like I said, I'm going to add some instructions to this so that it's a nice wide button that tells them what to do. So trust me that it'll be wide for right now. I'm just going to center it on my screen. Let's give it a CSS class. I think that probably the button style 1 will be appropriate here. I'm going to want to give it an icon class of power. That's going to be pretty good. And because I know I'm going to be adding text to it later on, let's also give it a class of text size medium. I know it doesn't change anything yet since we're not looking at any text on it yet, but this will save me from having to go back and add that class later on. Once you've got yours ready, then we are going to write some scripts.